Welcome to My IELTS Classroom, the podcast where two English experts talk all things IELTS. I'm Shelley Cornick.
And I'm Nick Long.
And today we have got our hands on the new academic Cambridge 17. What are the 4 essay questions in book 17? How would Nick and I approach them? And which one do we think is the trickiest? Good afternoon, Nick. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm all right.
How was your holiday?
It was good. Very, very tiring. I think I walked 60 kilometres in 4 days. It was first holiday in 2.5 years. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Today, unbelievably, way before the official Cambridge IELTS 17 book will be published, somehow it's found its way onto the internet. It seems to be that everywhere you look at the moment, there is a link to download the new Cambridge IELTS 17 book, just the academic version. Mm-hmm. So what I thought we'd do today is what we always do every time there's a new Cambridge book. It's one of my favourite episodes. Mm-hmm. We will go through the essay questions together, just the essay questions. And we will discuss, how we would approach them. We'll discuss what our opinion would be, what might make it difficult, and basically just give everybody listening a little insight into how 2 very experienced English teachers would tackle these particular questions. So before Nick and I start giving you our ideas for these essays, obviously you're going to get much more out of this podcast if you spend a few moments now thinking about your own ideas. So just spend 5 minutes on each question and just think, what's the topic of this question? Is there anything in particular I've been asked to consider? Then have a look what type of question it is. Is it discuss both sides? Do you need to give your opinion? Make sure you understand what your opinion is going to be if that's what you're asked for. And then get your ideas down. Think, how would you structure your essay? What ideas would you put in the first body paragraph? What ideas would you put in the second body paragraph? Do that now yourself. And then that's going to make a huge difference because then you can just listen to Nick and I also doing it and see if you're on the right track, if you've made a mistake, if your ideas match ours, or if you've got something different. Mm-hmm. All right, so go away and do that and then come back in a couple of seconds. Then you can hear Nick and I read each question and brainstorm and do exactly the same thing in real time. So, Nick, why don't you, as always, with your lovely voice, even though you're a bit tired from travelling, why don't you read this first question for us?
So, question number 1 is, it is important for people to take risks, both in their professional lives and their personal lives. Do you think the advantages of taking risks outweigh the disadvantages?
Okay. All right, so why don't we start for each one? Let's talk about the topic. Mm-hmm. Is this a familiar topic for IELTS? What have we got here? Important for people to take risks. Is that a familiar topic, or do you think this is something new that they're introducing in book 17?
It's fairly similar to the question about making changes.
That's what I think. Yeah. Some people like to make changes, others like to do the same things. It's in that same area, isn't it?
The one about the difficult situation, it's better to accept it. Other people think it's better to improve the situations. Very, very similar, I guess, isn't it?
Very similar. But I think the thing that maybe differentiates this one, and, if you've listened to our episode about analysing questions, I think the first thing that stood out for me for this question, I don't know for you, Nick, but what's the first thing, if we were teaching in a classroom now, what would we be trying to draw the students' attentions to?
Professional lives and personal lives.
Yes. I think in all the previous questions like this, it's always been something kind of vague.
A bit more general, hasn't it?
A difficult situation, right? Or changes in life. It didn't tell you what type of situations. Here, they have specified professional lives and personal lives. So let's think about the type of question we've got. So we've got an advantages outweigh disadvantages question. So we're going to have to offer advantages and disadvantages for both, aren't we? Yep. Because when we're, in our structuring our essay, depending on if you think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, you're still going to have to give both.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be the best way of structuring this? I mean, my idea is in the advantages paragraph, I'll probably give one advantage of being risky in your professional life and one in your personal life. Do you think? And in the disadvantages, same again?
The same, yeah. I would have done the same, yeah. One advantage for professional, one for personal, and then vice versa.
Exactly. So you want to, you definitely want to make sure you make it clear to the examiner that you've addressed all of the question by definitely giving arguments for professional and personal. Which then, I guess, leads to the question, what are the risks, I guess, that people take in their professional lives and their personal lives? Let's start with professional. What could be classified as a risk for somebody in their professional life?
Quite tricky, actually, isn't it? But I guess maybe applying for a promotion, like a higher position.
I think so. I think changing jobs, whether or not it's a promotion or moving to another company, that would be a definite sort of type of risk. We're not going to say if it's good or bad at the minute. So changing jobs. I also thought maybe starting like a new business or like being an entrepreneur kind of thing, or starting your own company. What other risks are there in professional life?
It's quite tricky, this one, isn't it?
Well, this is it is.
I think that's good, though. I think starting your own business is a good one. And changing jobs definitely is a good one. And I think both of those things have advantages and disadvantages. So you can just kind of pick the one that you think will be strongest to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll do that in a second. I thought, though, professional lives would be the easier of the two.
Yeah, personal.
Okay, so let's think then. How do people take risks in their personal lives?
I guess one thing I thought of is taking a loan to buy something.
Oh, that's true. So sort of financial risk. So getting a mortgage, taking a loan.
A loan to buy a car for something, to make a home improvement.
Definitely.
And again, like taking a loan for a car, there are advantages, disadvantages. Same for home improvement as well, or a mortgage.
Yeah.
I guess maybe moving to another country.
That was the other thing I was thinking of, which would be, for most students who are sitting the arts test, that's something we'd be familiar with. So I was thinking something about migration. I know you could get quite philosophical here. You could sort of talk about getting a divorce maybe or something like that. I mean, that's not something I think students would talk about, but that could be like taking a risk for a better life or something. Right. So, I mean, definitely before you even start thinking if the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, I think you've got to start thinking, what are the risks that people take? Using your instinct, Nick, what do you think your opinion would be here? Do you think the advantages of risks outweigh the disadvantages?
Probably I would say yes, they do.
I think I would do that as well. Right. So if we're going to have that opinion, then we'll put in our first paragraph the disadvantages. So what could be our disadvantages for taking risks? So let's think of professional life risks. I might use starting a new business here because that for me has maybe got the biggest disadvantage, right? Like some people, like there's maybe my argument would be something like, there's no guarantee that the risk will be successful. So maybe people who start a new business, they often risk losing, a lot of the capital and time and money if it's not successful. Do you think?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I would do the opposite. I would do that as the advantage because I think the benefits of doing that are the biggest. Like you sort of maximize.
So you're going to use that for the advantages one.
And I would.
So what would you?
I would probably say I would just say changing job probably for this one.
Actually, that's probably better because there's no guarantee that the new job will be better, right?
Yeah. So maybe it will have a higher salary, but maybe it's going to be more boring. Maybe you'll have more responsibility. Maybe it will be more demanding. And maybe it will be less fulfilling.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think that's a better choice. Sorry, I've changed my mind, everybody. I'm stealing Nick's idea. What about the personal lives then? You go first. I don't think I need to help. I'm making it worse. What do you think for the personal lives would be the negative?
I think I'm probably going to do taking a loan to buy a car here.
I think like financial stress or something. Yeah.
And I would because I don't want to focus on a mortgage, but I would focus on a car loan here because they can have very high interest rates. And there is a chance, like, if something happens in your job, you can very, very quickly be underwater.
Yeah, you can get into
unable
debt,
to
can't
pay.
you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good. And then, then for the next paragraph, the advantages, you're obviously going to then use, there are high rewards for people who take risks, like people who run their own company, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what personal life one would you use?
Quite tricky. I'm not sure, to be honest. I would probably do buying a home.
Yeah, that's a good one. Because I think a lot of students will talk about migration, but I guess not that many people actually migrate. I mean, if you look at the raw figures, it's probably millions, but in terms of percentages,
It's very small.
It's small. And so I always think the best argument are the arguments which apply to the most people. And many people own their own home, don't they? So that would be.
Yeah.
And what would you say the advantages are then of that? Just security or
security? Like, well, there are lots of questions about home ownership. So yeah, I would just say, yeah, you sort of, you're not wasting your money like you are on renting. You're sort of investing in the future. You have more security. If something goes wrong, you can just sell it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, again, it's I guess the advantages is all about, for both of them, in personal and professional, it's about the rewards that you get, isn't it? If the risk pays off,
yes,
essentially. On the face of it, I thought not that difficult, but having broken it down, I think that's a lot of things to think about in that essay.
Yeah, it's quite a hard question. Yeah, I think 40 minutes would challenge you. It would be quite a struggle, that question, I think.
Yeah. I think coming up with the risks in the first place and then sort of trying to logically put them into the two paragraphs, which one will I use for the advantages, which for the disadvantages? Yeah, good question, but on the harder side, I'd say that's a 7 or 8 out of 10 for difficulty. Compared to test number 2. Nick, you read this one.
Some children spend hours every day on their smartphones. Why is this the case? Do you think this is a positive or a negative development?
Wow. I mean, in terms of difficulty, I mean, we haven't started yet, but this seems much easier.
It seems much easier, yeah, for sure.
Because, smartphones are something which we all have. We all complain about children's, well, I do because I'm in my 40s. Children spend too much time on their smartphones. I say it about my nephew and niece all the time. So, why is that?
Smartphones are cheaper than ever. You could have an argument about price.
Yes, that's true.
That you could have an argument about safety, that, if a children has a smartphone with them at all times, they're always contactable. And because they have them at all times, they use them at all times.
Yeah.
You could say it's like a parenting tool. So lots of parents buy them to stop their children from annoying them.
That would be my first argument. Yes, is that many parents are quite happy to use them like a parenting tool, like a babysitter. Definitely. I think I'd also try and have a positive one as well, which is that, I know, for example, from my own experience with my nephews and my niece, is that there's just loads of really interesting interactive games on there. And the games are actually pretty addictive. Do you know what I mean? So I think that they are just genuinely interested watching YouTube videos about slime or playing Roblox or stuff like that. So I think they're addictive. But as we've always said, when we've got a question like, why is this the case? Is it positive or negative? If you've been a long-term listener, you should know what we're going to say. Usually what happens is, we explain why. And the why, well, we normally say it's a positive reason, don't we?
Usually,
yes. But, I mean, definitely here, do you think it's positive or negative? I'm definitely going to say it's negative.
Yeah, I would as well.
So I think, you've just come up with 4 or 5 reasons off the top of your head. Now what we've got to do is think, which are we going to put in the why paragraph and which will lean better towards the negative development paragraph. So maybe the addictiveness will definitely go into the negative. And that is true. Because I saw last week, there was something in the paper here, Nick, where a 7-year-old girl had memorised her mum's credit card number and used it to spend £500 in Roblox, the game, on Roblox dollars. But the funny thing was, in the picture in the newspaper, she sat with her phone smiling. She's proud of what she did. She's got no remorse whatsoever. So I definitely think addiction would go in the I think that will go in the negative. What, maybe the parenting tool as well?
Yeah,
would be good
I would
there?
definitely put that in the negative, like parents using it as a tool.
Yeah, I think those would be the two that go for the negatives. And then what have we got left for the positive? That, the games are, well, maybe we don't want it overlap with the interactive one.
I would definitely put like the fact that they're cheap as...
Yes, and accessible and have a lot of free kind of stuff on it. And I also think what you said was quite good about the safety issue. People, like parents, buy them for safety, but then because they're in their pocket, they tend to get taken out and used. Yeah. I think that's, like, compared to the first question.
Compared to the first one, it's much easier.
I think it's much, much, much. Yeah. Yeah, I don't even think I've got any real comments about that. I mean, I would say if you went in and that was your question...
Happy days.
Happy days. The only thing you've got to do is brainstorm why that's happening and then sort of separate into why and then negative.
Organising your ideas, I think, would be quite difficult, and making sure there's no overlap as well would probably be quite tricky.
That is the thing. That's why it's important that you plan the whole essay before you start writing, because otherwise you could get into a bit of trouble, maybe, with being a bit repetitive, I think. Okay, let's move on to the third question then.
Okay, question number 3. Some people believe that professionals, such as doctors and engineers, should be required to work in the country where they did their training. Others believe they should be free to work in another country if they wish. Discuss both these views and give your own opinion.
In terms of topic, this is reminding me, Nick, of a question. It's not from a Cambridge book, but it was from a reported question. Do you remember the one about in some areas, doctors and teachers are trained and then they are forced to go and work in remote places or in the countryside? Do you remember that one? Is that a good idea? It's kind of similar. But it's definitely a new topic. I don't think I've ever seen this exact topic before. So I think the difficulty of this question will just be, could students come up with the ideas on their own? And I guess, to be honest, for this one, you've just got one idea, really. It's or one thing to think about. Should doctors or professionals have to stay where they did their training? So when they say training, what do you think that probably means?
I'm guessing like education.
Like university or something.
Yeah, well, if it's a doctor, it's going to be university. If it's an engineer, it's going to be some kind of, probably university as well, but maybe some kind of more sort of, I can't remember the word now. Not academic. What's the other word?
Vocational.
Vocational, yes. Vocational course or something like that.
True. Now, in the question, it says professionals such as doctors and engineers. Do we have to focus on doctors and engineers?
We do not.
No, because it's given as the example, so we could also talk about teachers would be a good one,
teachers, lawyers.
Scientists. Yeah. Others think that they should be free. So, essentially, I guess the question would be, why should they stay in the country where they did the training? What would the arguments be? The people who are saying that they should be required to work where they did the training. What would be the logic behind that, do you think?
Well, I guess one reason would be that it depends if they've had free education.
Yeah, that's what I think.
The country has invested in their education.
Yes.
So they should give something back, I guess, would be the logic there. Whether that's 2 or 3 years or whatever.
I agree. I mean, I definitely think sort of like the first foundational piece of that argument has got to be the country has invested in that person and therefore should take something back. I guess the second thing, which is sort of similar, but I guess the other thing is that particularly for some countries, I'm thinking sort of like more developing countries, that if they've invested and they move, there's that expression, isn't there? Like the brain drain.
Yep.
Particularly, if you are a doctor or a teacher and you can get a higher salary in another country, well, that's great for you as an individual, but for the country that you're leaving,
it's not so great.
It's not so great because there is going to be a lack of professionals in the country. They're never going to be able to, particularly for less developed countries, they're never going to be able to catch up. But this is the thing. I guess that all depends. If people have paid for their education, then that's more of a moral responsibility, isn't it? To stay and kind of at a grassroots level build your nation. So what would be the argument for why people should be free to work in another country?
Well, because we could say if they've worked very hard and they've got a very high level of skill and ability, they should be free to choose if they're wanted in America or the UK or another country, they should be free to go and take that opportunity. It's
like personal freedom, basically, isn't it? Yeah. And you might want to say, I mean, I think the problem is that for me is really the main argument, really. Other than that, I would say, if people have paid for their higher education, like, for example, in the UK or America, it would seem sort of immoral that they wouldn't be able to go and practice, have a right to practice what they'd learned.
Exactly. I do think that's where it comes down, actually, like this whole paid for education, not paid for. It's very difficult to pick a position like 100% one side, I would say.
It is, and I think the sad thing is that we're not told in the question if people paid for their education or they didn't pay. So I mean, a lot of your answer is going to be maybe a lot of second conditionals.
Yeah, things like if they are required to, if they pay for their course, and stuff like that.
But I think that makes it difficult to answer, because my question would be, well, okay, it's not about where they did their training, because also, what if, a lot of people, actually, that's a good idea, because a lot of people actually do their training in other countries, don't they? We have a lot of doctors who've done their training somewhere in Eastern Europe. So they've travelled from other countries, and now they're studying with us because they want to move to the UK, so they're doing the NHS Foundation. But it could also be that, some people, international students, would then have to stay in the country where they studied. Do you see what I'm saying? And practice. Whereas that's not a practical solution.
Very tricky question, that one.
I can't think of any other reasons. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's hard to come up with. Even the first opinion, I think it's quite difficult to come up with the second one as well. I know you did, but I don't think I would have been able to be honest.
Well, I mean, as you said at the beginning, this is a candidate maybe for a balanced approach.
Possibly. Yes.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So that would require the first paragraph talk about people who believe you must always, no matter if you paid or didn't pay, stay in the country where you did the training. So you could talk about, I don't know, sort of like a moral obligation, if it's not about financials, to stay, to build up the country, to stop the brain drain. The next one could be, should be free because of personal freedom, as we said. And then the third paragraph should be, I believe that people should be free only if they have paid for their education. Because then they are essentially independent and they're able to move abroad. But as we always say, be careful of a balanced approach. If you don't know what you're doing, you can get into a real
pickle.
Pickle, yeah, real pig's ear.
You can make a pig's ear of it, yeah.
Yeah. So, but if you're listening and you're looking for an 8 or a 9, that might be my approach for that. Because as we've been trying to say here, it seems to me it's all about the money. As it always is, isn't it? Who has funded this education? That is the key. I don't know, on a level of difficulty, how difficult do you think that one is?
I think that one's the hardest so far.
Harder than the first one?
Harder than the first one, because I think you can think of ideas for that one fairly easily. Organisation maybe is a bit difficult. For this one, I think it's very difficult to come up with ideas and to pick a side clearly.
Yes.
So I think for me personally, I would struggle the most with question number 3 there.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I was going to write, as I recommend people do, a traditional discuss both sides, I'd probably agree with actually that they should stay in the country.
I think I would as well.
Because then I could just say, about the government funding and all that, and just assume that the government's paid for their training, and just assume it without really broaching that part. But yeah, I agree, that is very difficult.
Okay, question number 4. Nowadays, a growing number of people with health problems are trying alternative medicines and treatments instead of visiting their usual doctor. Do you think this is a positive or a negative development.
Mm-hmm.
Bit of a weird one.
The student who kindly supplied this book to me supplied it to me because she said, I don't really understand what alternative medicines are. So I don't really know if it's positive or negative. So I guess in terms of topic, this is a new topic.
Yeah.
I have to say it's a topic which is often covered in English textbooks. I think I'm remembering in Cutting Edge, there was something about alternative medicine. I think even an English file in a really old one. I mean, it is something that is included in a high-level standard education, but I can also see how this could be quite stressful for some students because there's no example there, is there?
No.
Which I'm surprised about. I would have thought they would have given an example. So if I say to you, Nick, alternative medicine, what comes into your head? What would you classify as alternative?
It's like herbs and spices and teas and stuff like that, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think there's definitely herbal medicine. I'm thinking in particular of the sort of Chinese herbal medicine, like shark fin soup and stuff like that. Homeopathy? Do you know what that is?
I've heard of it before, yeah.
That's where... I'm a bit sceptical of homeopathy, but that's where you get like, I don't know, a litre of water and put 2 drops of banana skin in it and then shake it and that's supposed to help you. So there's that kind of medicine. It's interesting though, Nick, because there's alternative medicine and then there's something called complementary medicine. Do you know what the difference is? I randomly found this out about a week ago.
No idea, no.
So alternative, which is what they've specified here, is medicine that has got no scientific basis.
Right.
So there's no sort of things. And so, you know, you're not going to get that. If you go to the NHS in England, they're not going to be giving you. So that kind of stuff. Herbal medicine, homeopathy, that's definitely alternative. There's also complementary medicine, which is stuff like going to the chiropractor or having acupuncture, which is often offered alongside traditional methods because there is a little bit more scientific or sort of background to that kind of thing. Do you think, I mean, I think you could talk about all of those things.
I think you probably
essay.
could, yeah, because it's not traditional medicine, is it, I guess?
Yeah. So I guess we need to think then, what are the good or bad things about alternative medicines?
Well, instantly the thing that comes into my head, a good thing, is that you can get treatment much quicker than if you go for a traditional doctor.
Oh, so speed. And maybe if you're somewhere like America, cost as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, that's interesting. So that's a positive. We might want to keep that as balance, right? Because if we're writing a positive or negative development essay, we're essentially writing do you agree or disagree? So, you know, the way that we teach, we're going to have just 2 reasons why it's positive or 2 reasons why it's negative with a balance somewhere in there. I mean, my first and biggest thought is that there is no scientific proof that the alternative medicines work. And so if people are going at instead of visiting their usual doctor.
It's not good, is it?
No. And there are lots of very sad stories about people who's, could have been treated with usual medicine or scientific medicine or pharmaceuticals, we could say, but who become very sick because they're trying these things which don't have scientific proof. So that would definitely be my biggest negative. What else? Can you think of anything else positive or negative? Because we'd need 2, wouldn't we?
That's so difficult, isn't it?
Oh, I know a positive one. Thank you, Cutting Edge. One of the things that they discovered that people that went for alternative medicines is that although there's not as much scientific proof about the efficacy, that's a good word, of this medicine.
That's a good one, yeah.
What alternative practitioners do is spend a lot of time talking to the patient. So whereas in traditional medicine, you've probably got 5 minutes in England anyway, in your appointment to go in, tell them the problem, then you're out. If you go to alternative medicine, you get a lot more time, a lot more attention. And so people feel that they've been listened to and there can be almost a placebo effect in a way.
Sort of the positivity sort of rubs off and makes them feel better.
Yeah, so like they feel listened to, they feel like their problems are being,
understood.
Taken into understood. Yeah. So that's another positive.
I would say, I was going to say, yeah, you could have like an argument about the sort of maybe alternative medicine is much better mentally for somebody.
Yes.
And what you just said, we could incorporate that into the argument. Also, I would guess that alternative medicine doesn't have as many side effects as pharmaceutical medicine. So that might be a positive as well. You know, if your doctor sends you home and says, "Oh, drink some mint tea with lemon and honey to get rid of your sore throat," probably better than taking antibiotics.
Do you know what? I think that's brilliant. And I think I'd probably go a bit stronger than that. So I'm thinking about people who've got, for example, stage 4 cancer, who are having chemotherapy, which will not extend their life for very long and will make them extremely sick. They will have like debilitating side effects. Or they could have these alternative therapies, which, you know, may not extend their life, but it's gonna give them a better quality of life.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I mean, the negative for me is that there's just, I mean, which I'm going to have to argue is negative because the problem is that there's no guarantee that these medicines work.
Yeah.
But actually, I think you would have a much more interesting essay if you just said it was positive, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, for the negative, I'm going to have to think of a second idea. I'm going to think that the problem is that there's no governing body for many of these alternative medicines.
No regulation.
No regulation. So anybody could say, I'm a herbalist. I'm an acupuncturist. Come and let me stick needles in you. But I do think that's a problem. It's difficult to understand who's a good practitioner, who's not, who's qualified and who's not qualified.
Yes. Yeah.
But I'm surprised at how many positives we actually came up with. I'm going to say it's not I don't think, do you think that's the most difficult today?
No, for sure no. I think number 3 is by far the hardest one.
I still think it's the where you're going to work. But I might put that as maybe second or maybe joint second with the risks.
Yeah.
Maybe actually that's second, because I think for some students also...
The language is going to be quite tricky there, I think.
Yes, and I think you're definitely going to have to use some examples of alternative medicines. So you're going to have to be able to spell acupuncture, homeopathy, chiropractor, right? That's not easy terms of spelling. And if you don't know those words,
you're going to have a very difficult time, aren't you?
Yeah, because if you don't know what the alternative medicines are, how do you know if they're positive or negative, right? You're going to end up talking about massage or something, which, you know, you can, but it's not really good enough for the whole essay. So yeah, bit of a mixed bunch there. Interesting. We've got 4 different types of essays this time. So we've got to discuss both sides. No, that's what I was going to say. There are no to what extent essays. Instead, we've got the positive or negative development, which I guess, you know, is very similar. So no new type of essays, although we might do another recent question essay in the coming weeks, Nick, because there have been a couple of weird essays reported to me.
Wow.
Recently, things I've never seen before. But in terms of this Cambridge 17, a couple of new topics, a couple of tricky stuff, but nothing wildly difficult, I don't think. Yeah. So what do you think? Were our ideas the same as yours? Did you enjoy this lesson? If you did, let us know. You can email us at hello@myieltsclassroom.com. But yeah, thanks very much, Nick.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
My IELTS Classroom podcast is a production of My IELTS Classroom Limited. Nick and I do not represent IELTS, and everything you heard in this episode is our own personal opinion. You can find the show notes and transcript for this episode on our blog. That's www.blog.myieltsclassroom.com, and if you're looking for our video courses, speaking lessons and marking service, you can find them at www.myieltsclassroom.com. If you have a question or query or just want to chat, you can email Nick and I at hello@myieltsclassroom.com. Our theme music is by Heartbeat and our artwork is produced by David Brown. Have a great week, study hard, and remember,
This is My IELTS Classroom.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you found the content useful, please click like to help the channel, and don't forget to subscribe for new lessons every Friday. Plus, you can find more expert content at www.myieltsclassroom.com.